I'd like to open the Joint Special School Building Committee meeting. It's Thursday, September 26, 2019. We're in the Nashua High School North Lecture Hall, and it is 7:02 p.m. Okay, so Mr. Guarino, would you read the prayer, and Alderman Wilshire, would you lead us in the pledge?
Okay, please stand. Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with the spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Wilshire.
Here.
Alderwoman Malitzi Goya.
Present.
Alderman Jetty is not with us yet. Alderman Clee.
Here.
Ms. Oden.
Here.
Mr. Guarino is here. Ms. Raymond is not here. Mr. Mosher.
I'm here.
Mr. Mosher is joining us by phone. Are you by yourself tonight, Mr. Mosher?
I certainly am.
Thank you. Ms. Porter.
Here.
Also present, we have Mr. Smith, Ms. Fitzpatrick, and we have Mr. Ouellette and Mr. Lee joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. I don't see previous meeting minutes here. I think they're attached, so they usually list them. Yeah, so they were attached. So if there's no objection, I would like to waive the reading of the minutes of the prior meeting, accept them, and place them on file. Okay.
There were two meetings, so it was on July 25th.
Oh, okay. So,
September 17th.
what was the other one? July 20th. Oh, okay, and then October 17th.
September 17th.
September 17th. Okay, so there were two meetings, in the one in July and the special one in October, so. September, I wrote it down too. September, and we will accept those, place them on file, and waive the reading. Okay, remarks by Chairman. This evening, we're going to be having our architect, Harriman, go over some of the findings from many of our vendors that have been doing work and research on the 4 sites involved in the middle school project. So we will be listening to what they have to say. If there are questions by anyone on the joint special, you're certainly welcome to ask them. And then we'll have comments by members of the public. For the public, we have public comment, so you can come up and comment on anything you've seen. If you have questions that you would like the joint special to answer, there's a sheet up front that you can place your question on, and we will get back to you. I think that's just about it. I just did want a couple other things. So this evening, again, we're going to be going over some preliminary work that's been done on all of the sites, and we'll be discussing that. The final report from the architects will be delivered at a joint special meeting on October 9th. And the final report will be presented to this committee. After that, we will be having we will pass out copies of that report to the Board of Education, the superintendent, the mayor, the Board of Aldermen, people get a chance to review it. We will have a meeting with the Board of Education to go over the report and get comments back. We will also be having a public, I don't want to call it a public hearing, that's too formal. It's going to be a public review of the findings from the architect, and we get comments back from the public. When we've gone through that procedure, then we will come back to the Joint Special School Building Committee for a final determination on the path forward. Just a couple other notes. Sean and I were at the Capital Improvements Committee meeting the other night, and this project got an A1 rating. That cleared the $1 million from the city's surplus from last year that got added to this fund, and sets us on the right path for this project. Let the record show that Alderman Jettie arrived at 7:07. So, any questions come up on that? So it will still be a while before any final decision is made. What you'll see tonight is some preliminary work. Once the project goes forward, the final design and drafting is all done over several months after the first of the year. And that will be working with this group and others before we actually put a backhoe in the ground. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harriman. If you'd introduce yourselves and give us a presentation. By the way, the construction manager is not here this evening from Harvey. He had a conflict, and so there won't be any construction manager's input. That input will come on October 9th. Yes.
So before we start, just for the public who's here and who may be watching, I'm assuming that the documents that we're reviewing will be attached to the minutes also, so people will be able to review those as they read through the minutes.
Yes, I also found that I could not find the minutes posted on either one of our websites, and we've taken care of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so they will be on both websites, not only the cities, but the Board of Ed, or school district, rather. Jamie or Mark?
Yep, very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Dowd. All right, so before we get started, there are a couple extra copies that we have for members of the public that may not have picked one up. There's, I think, right here in the corner of tonight's presentation. So if you'd like to help yourself for a copy, there's one there, or a couple there. We look forward to the presentation tonight. This is a progress update of where we are at this point in time, and just kind of, again, reminding ourselves of the overview of the goals of this study. The feasibility study is to look at the three middle schools and look at, right now, there's sort of three main components. One is how are the middle schools doing in terms of serving the needs educationally, and so what is it they're doing to support all of the learning and community functions that occur inside of those buildings? And so that's an important primary component. The second thing we're doing is looking at the facilities themselves and the condition of the systems in the facilities, and so that's also an important aspect of the work that we were involved in analyzing the buildings. And then the third aspect too is the idea of the sites, and so it's not just the buildings and thinking about the schools themselves, but it's also thinking about the context of where the buildings are and the sites and how those are supporting all these functions as well. And so tonight what we have is an update on a lot of the analysis that's been going on and how that has culminated into to some options that we're looking at, or the progress of the concept design, and then that has led to, or is leading to, a cost analysis by the construction manager, and so that's forthcoming. That'll be coming up, but right now we want to really bring you up to date on where we are with the concepts as they've evolved to this point. So a lot of really good information, and we hope that there generates a lot of thought about where we are, and see as we move forward to delivering the report on the 9th Mr. Dowd suggested. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Willett.
Hi there. So up on the screen here and in the packets you have, you'll see kind of the agenda of what we'd like to cover tonight. We're going to overview kind of the as Alderman Dowd had mentioned, the overview of the investigations and findings of some of the consultants that were hired to do certain work on some of the schools, or 3 schools, and then the new site location. Then we'll take a look at the Fairgrounds Middle School site and building and proposed updates and upgrades. Then move on to Pennachuck, doing the same thing, Elm Street School, and then of course the possible new location, proposed site and building option. So one of the first consultants that was hired, or maybe not in that order, but one of the consultants was the hazardous material survey consultant. That was Damaris Environmental. They have gone to the Elm Street Middle School, and their task was to find locations of different hazardous materials that would require special removals or disposals, depending on what they found. Some of those items that they did discover were flooring materials that were hazardous, some mastics, which is like the glue that kind of holds the flooring down in some locations, pipe fittings, ceilings, which included some plaster ceilings, and they also mentioned something about the softer ceilings. Blackboards that were assumed to have asbestos. A lot of times that's the mastic behind it, but it looks like he mentioned just the blackboards themselves. Window caulkings were noted as having PCBs, which is another hazardous material different than asbestos. And then there was some other things, but those are kind of the big summary ones we pulled out of. It was quite a list of items that he had mentioned. Then they had the traffic study, and that was Vanessa and Associates, and their task was to identify appropriate traffic patterns and optional traffic control and safety improvements, and make suggestions based on what they were finding. So they went out there and they took surveys of vehicles passing through, how much traffic there was. They look at what traffic, if school was to increase capacity, what that might mean for that area. Safe signage, potential traffic lights, and whatnot. So at Fairgrounds Middle School, a couple of the improvements that they had recommend was improve site access, and then improve safety signage. Signage was one that was recommended for all the schools. Seemed like some of them had some older signage, maybe not like the flashing lights and things like that. So that was one that carried through to all the schools. Pennachuck Middle School, they proposed that a new intersection signal go at Manchester and the Manchester Street and the entry to that school. I think we've had a few discussions on that here in this committee a few times. And so that was actually a recommendation they ended up finding based on their study. And then some roadway safety updates. We'll actually look at the Pennachuck Middle School one later in this report. A page right out of his Giles, who was with Vanessa and Associates, right out of his report. We'll look at that in a little bit. So, and then of course the signage at Elm Street Middle School. They had mentioned improved site access. There was lots of notes about how the safety of that site, access to that site could use some improvements. It's a difficult one. There's a lot of public traffic, people walking around, all kinds of access points into that school, and they're crossing streets at all locations. So that was a concern that we had noted over there. And then at the new school, we'll look at that a little bit, but it's not fully determined what's happening there. But again, we'll look at it. But they recommended a signal at the entry and then safety signage, just like you would at any other school. The geotechnical investigation, that was done by Malone and McBroom. We, I think, just recently had them get back out there and do additional borings. This is at the new site. Their goal is to identify the soil conditions and the subterranean conditions, which means they are looking to see if the soil that's there is capable of supporting a building, what type of footings and concrete foundations it might need. They're looking to see if there's ledge there, how deep that ledge is. You know, they something called refusal. They send this auger down, and they might hit that at 10 feet below the surface of the ground. That's refusal. That's where the ledge might appear to be. So they're looking at locations of the water table to analyze and see if it's a really wet site or or how much drainage might need to happen. So at the new school, the findings were the soils were generally to be found to be suitable for construction. They were of the right materials to support typical foundations. And then the site survey, Hayner and Swanson had done that one. They went out, and their job is to take a boundary of the sites. They look for different, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, help me out here, Mark. I'm drawing a blank.
So, so primarily, we want to know what the elevations are around the site, and then we're to also verify the property boundaries as well. So that's, and we'll also look at any utilities on the site too. This one doesn't have that much in the way of utilities, but that's primarily what the site surveyor is providing us, that level of information.
Yeah, I guess another one is the grades. They're looking at the grades and the slope of the topography of the site.
Just one thing, Jamie. If any of the members of the joint special would like the actual hard copy or soft copy version, if we have it, of any of these reports, you're more than happy to have one. However, I can tell you right now, they're 95% engineering, and you need someone that can, like our architect, that has an engineer that can evaluate it. But you're free to get one if you want one. They are very detailed, they're very engineering oriented. And the only other thing I want to say about this particular slide is there's a big hill on the right-hand side of the property. It was found to be material that we can move. It's not ledge.
And Alderman Dow, just as a follow-up to that, was there any ledge found anywhere that might require blasting?
There is ledge. In fact, you can see up on this little screen, there's a little spot there that pokes up through. There was different levels and depths of ledge underneath the earth or in the earth. To answer the question about blasting, overall the site looks good, and where the building would sit, it looks pretty good. The full exact location of where that's going to end up grade-wise on that earth is yet to be finalized. But I guess the answer would be that you might have some localized, I guess, if their pipe has to get through. But it's indeterminate at this point.
Okay.
So, yeah, the report basically said no extensive. If there's any at all, there wouldn't be extensive. And if any blasting is done, they have to do a pre-neighborhood survey with all the homes in the area and give people an advance notice. But based on what we know now, we don't envision very much, if any, blasting.
Oops, sorry. I was just going to add to that. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm done. I was going to...
I just have a question. You said that some of these reports are available. I just wanted to look at the traffic study, if it's available.
Sure.
So
Yep. We'll get them a copy.
you can send it. If it's electronic, you can PDF me. So if it's
Electronically?
you don't have to do the appendix, just the,
It is electronic, so.
yeah, just PDF. Thank you.
So at this particular site, just to elaborate a little bit on what I said, piping might need to be, there's a potential. This site does slope away down toward the location of where water, gas, and sewage would go. If this site is chosen, it would come this way. So those pipes actually naturally drain this way. So that helps in reducing the chances that you would end up having to blast for those particular items. So Fairgrounds Middle School. these are some of the key features that, at the site that we are making as a proposed recommendations and upgrades. So I've labeled with letters corresponding to the paragraphs up on the left. So A is the perimeter security drive should be upgraded. That's this piece here that comes around to the building. It's currently could be used for the fire trucks to access the backs of the building. And there was spots noted as, well, the pavement was deteriorating in some areas, and there was a steep slope here, which could cause some issues with the fire trucks approaching or leaving the building. Item B is additional parking on the south side. We looked at adding additional parking spaces back here to help accommodate any additional needs that would be needed for this particular school. Item C, we would look at reconfiguring separating, I think we talked a little bit about this before, but separating the parent drop-off, which comes through and drops off, from the bus loop. Right now, they kind of intertwine, which can cause hazards. So if you create a separation for that in areas, or bullet C, I guess you'd call it, we'll reconfigure the drop-off for the entry and expanded the bus loop slightly. And then D, the traffic engineer suggested a queuing lane to allow some of this parent queuing off of the street so they're not backing up traffic. So what they suggested was that maybe putting a certain amount of length, and I couldn't give you the exact number without looking at the report, but and hashing this for no parking in this area so that parents could queue up and wrap around and then leave safely without having to go out around people in the street. And then there would still be parking up further in the street that already exists there.
One other thing is, one of the things that causes concerns on this street is the fact that we have two schools right across from one another. And they, for whatever reason, leave that up to the Board of Ed, they start about the same time. So the traffic on that street is pretty intense. That's why the queuing lane and getting cars out of the main traffic flow. Also, if you've been over to Fairgrounds, there's a big hole there, and I don't know if you can even get a car through there without hitting something, but definitely not a fire truck, and the fire department would like us to fix it. Mr. Guarino?
We did get some emails about people who have to drop their kids off in this area, and they were telling us that this is pretty bad because the two schools are happening at the same time. But one of the things they mentioned was, I think in the wintertime, they'd like to see better plowing of the sidewalks in the wintertime because it pushes kids onto the, it really has no bearing on this, but I just want to mention that, pushes some of the kids into the streets during the wintertime. And I'm trying to remember what the other thing was. Maybe more enforcement, because even though we have, and this is good, even though we have channelization, people like to break the law and just do U-turns, so enforcement, I think, is important too, which is not a criticism of this, but I just wanted to mention those things.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
Just a quick question while we're looking at this. The additional queuing lane, or the recommended queuing lane, is that going to result from taking parking spaces? Is that what I heard correctly? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, and I don't think that's an issue, but just to clarify, we're not widening or moving sidewalks or curbing.
Correct.
We're just hashing parking spaces.
So the first
Thank you.
question I had was because of the playground,
Yes.
playground. And we've added more parking spaces, so, and typically the highest volumes in the playground is when the school's not in session, so it should be great.
Right.
Okay. Then we move on to the actual building of the fairgrounds. And here's some of the recommended improvements or upgrades here. So bullet A, I'll find it, there it is the new admin and secure entrance. So I think we spoke about this numerous times. You come in right now and you have to go down the hallway to the admin area. We propose that be reconfigured and give a little appropriate spacing to the security and vestibule, and upgrade actually the restrooms at the same time. B is upgrades to the Unified Arts. There's some upgrades that would happen back here, which Unified Arts would be art, wood shop, STEM, music. There's a STEM classroom here too as an upgrade. So actually in this one, STEM moves here, and then art actually moves back with the Unified Arts. And then science room upgrades. C is these science rooms. These are existing science rooms that were likely to have been built original to the building. They lack appropriate handicap accessibility to the counters and sinks and lab stations. So we'd recommend upgrading those to meet current ADA standards. Team collaboration and team collaborative instruction spaces. Our spaces are pods in each of the classroom wings. I don't remember which order it is, but there's 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so those teachers don't really have a space to, well, the students kind of do right now, but it doesn't have a space for the teachers to collaborate and instruct students together. They have to do them in individual rooms, so it's nice to have those communities, as we spoke about numerous times before. So those kind of happen here in these locations. The gymnasium has a few upgrades we're recommending. Of note is refinishing of floors or replacing floors. Some of the windows here have some really old shades, and I think like we've done on Broad Street and Sunset, we replace those with like a cowl wall. We'd recommend doing that. It's like a translucent panel as opposed to a window that just lets all the light in and blast your eyes. And they're more energy efficient than the glass that's there. A few other things. Let's see. There was we recommended a dividing curtain. There's a folding partition now that's not great and not super functional. The dividing curtain works really nice. And upgraded bleachers where needed. Area F, upgrades to the special education room. So there's a relocated OT/PT, more appropriate here. This space is used right now for special ed, and it needs a few improvements. So we recommend a few improvements to some of those spaces. And then systems upgrades. You won't see it. You don't think you'll see a logo tag on there, but just some limited systems like electrical, mechanical, fire alarm upgrades that are required. So Penachuk. Earlier I spoke about the traffic study, and this is a page out of Vanessa and Associates' report with recommendations, and we've gone ahead and put some tags on there to help clarify what they're recommending. Tag A is a traffic signal here. So Manchester's here, and the existing entrance to the school goes this way. And so the traffic signal here. And then item B, additional entry for the buses and emergency access is off this way here. So the buses would come in, or fire trucks or police can come in and loop around, do their loop in the site, and then come back out, and they would come out through here. Item C, the separation median at entry. You look at a little median here to help separate traffic coming in and leaving. D, the right and left lane exit. So one of the things that are being looked at is to have a turning lane coming into the site at that signal. This will widen the road a little bit, and I think we spoke about possibly, and Alderman Dowd, I think you probably might want to speak to that, I can see.
All right, I've been working with Penachuk, some of the lands that we need up near the front on this side and here. Penachuk's willing to work with us to transfer that land to the city. Even though we own the Penachuk, we're the sole owner, we don't run the company, so they own the land, and they would help us with that piece. Also, this emergency exit here for the buses has been approved by the city engineer. So all of that design has been approved. We've been working with all the city departments going through. They've all met with the architect and the construction manager on all of these changes.
Yeah, so providing that land, they're recognizing that creates a safer spot for students. And they have access here too, so there's a little road here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Item E, entry turning lane onto Manchester. Oh, so we've talked about this in a couple of our meetings where people have recommended maybe that this come off to the right to give us a turning lane off from the people that are waiting at the light to go straight. And the traffic engineer actually suggested that too, so that was great. And F, improved pedestrian crossing, adding sidewalks and appropriate lighting, flashing lights and whatnot to help the students get across. We understand that there's some pedestrian traffic crossing guard issues, and I think all these combined should help that issue. At the building at Pennachuck, a few items. Some of these are repetitive. Again, we're looking to help create more equality between the schools. Pardon me. A, classroom addition. So we have modulars outside the building right now. We'd look to add an addition to help house the modulars in addition to increasing the populations to help balance out the schools a little bit. So that's these additions here. So the A is kind of in the center, but it's representative of this whole area right here and right here. And then the modulars would go away. The library addition, some of these spaces in here is where the library exists now, and some other spaces are needed to accommodate. So those spaces could be pulled out and put into here, and the library could be pulled out into a new addition over here. Upgrades to the unified arts, and that's, you got STEM here. And D, science room. So same thing with these labs here. They're kind of outdated, don't address all the handicap accessibility. So we'd again propose that those get addressed. E, team collaborative instructive spaces, like on the last one. These teachers need some spaces to collaborate with their students and each other. So we've created some spaces, little alcoves to do those type of things. Gymnasium upgrades, very similar to the last one. Floor, divider curtain, bleachers are in need of some repairs or replacement, excuse me. G, upgrades to special education rooms. There's some special education rooms here being worked on. And that's it for that one. Oh, some down here too.
Yeah,
Sorry,
just-
special ed right there.
Just one thing. The portables at all the schools have reached their life expectancy and probably beyond. And plus, they provide without getting into details, a security risk. So they're being replaced wherever we have them. And also, if we go, what we want to do is balance the three schools we end up with at 800 plus students. It's a little more than 800, but right now there's 630. And when we did the analysis going through the building, we found that they were having meetings with students in closets. They don't have enough space now. So the additions are required, and it will free up the school to act like a middle school. Alderman Jettie.
Could you just help me? I got disoriented here. Where is, on this slide, where is Manchester Street?
Right here.
Okay.
Mrs. Oden?
Yeah, thank you. Going back to the Pennachuck Middle School slide, I see where on E, there is a lane to turn right into the school for the morning. As somebody who came by there 3 days a week all of last year, at that time, there is a substantial amount of traffic. It almost goes back to Henry Burke Highway most mornings. So I would say to make that lane as long as you can, A lot of people take that road to get to Tinker Road or to get up to Merrimack, to go to the Y there. It's a real heavily trafficked road. So if we can make that turning lane as long as possible, because there is a substantial amount of traffic that backs up there.
So having, living off Tinker Road and having my ward just north of here, I've got a lot of input on that intersection being terrible. And this will be as long as possible to allow that queuing. And the idea is to have safety for the students and safety for the traffic, and also allow people better ability to travel up and down Manchester Street and not be as impacted by the school as they have in the past.
Thank you.
Elm Street site, we're proposing that it has a single secure entrance location. So we've talked a little bit about this in the past. Right now, there's an inaccessible for handicapped persons to enter here, and there's multiple locations that enter. Now, we're not suggesting all those spaces get closed off, those doors. They'd just be, they'd be secured, and you'd try to focal all the people that are entering the building during the daytime through a main entry. And to do that, you'd put additional parking back here, item B, a little bit of off-street parking there. And then you'd reconfigure the drop-off at the entry bus loop, so that's this guy here. And an on-site dedicated parent drop-off, which would be was proposed here. So the parents come in, they queue on E, and then they can drop off and leave. So their kids are being dropped off right near that main entry. And then the portables that are here would be removed. Anything else you want to say about that one?
Just for the record, if we note that the superintendent of schools joined us at approximately 7:35. Mr. Mosley?
So Elm Street School, the building itself, as we spoke about just a moment ago, or I spoke about, was is a new secure entrance. So you can see that here. And as I mentioned, the existing goes here. People come up a set of stairs to get into the building. They come up another set of stairs to go down. That would actually be up to the next floor up and come down to an admin area. What we propose is you're dropping off back here or coming into the building through here. You're being welcomed by a secure vestibule and a administrative area through right here, which is item B, which has nurse, admin, guidance. It's kind of that suite through here. Item C would be the new cafeteria and kitchen. There's some concerns back there with the building that's there, and so we'd look to put a new addition there to address that. D, updated special ed classrooms. That kind of is throughout, but I kind of targeted one area where they're kind of almost located now. We'll reconfigure those. It's pretty poorly configured right now, and some rooms don't even have any windows. So we tried to address that so that at least each classroom would have some windows. E is modified and updated unified arts areas. So you have music. This one right now, you come into the building and you come into the space. You immediately have to go down steps. So there's a ramp over here and a lift and all that. So it's not ideal for handicap accessibility. So we proposed some modifications there and some reconfigurations back here. Eric, do you have something? Before you go ahead. Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. F, as we spoke about in the other two schools, some team collaborative instruction spaces. We've included some of those and reconfigured the rooms through here, which is item G, to become more appropriately sized. There still may not be enough space to totally appropriate size them per the New Hampshire DOE standards, or BOE. But we're getting much closer than they are right now. They're very undersized. And H, where am I? H, current, okay, I guess that's it on that one. Yes.
Okay, just a few things. If this remains a school, the auditorium would remain with the school, and the lobby, which is approximately a $4 million addition, would be part of this project. If the building isn't used as a school anymore and the city relinquishes ownership, it would become a tax plus to the city, and this would be part of a separate project. The only other thing I want to mention is this building is 84 years old. Just as a reference, my grandfather was on the Joint Special School Building Committee when that was built between 1931 and 1936. And when you get the final report, you'll see that in order for us to go in and do any work in this building, we have to touch a lot of things. And you'll see that in the final report.
Yeah, a lot is an understatement, Mr. Alderman Dowd. So a few things I'd also like to point out back on the site here. I mean, you can see we're talking about adding parking, right? And we're adding some lanes that help traffic flow and getting students into a secure entry and securing the school. But we still don't see any fields. You still don't have any play fields out here. It's just a really tight site for the size of the school. So, and then I've included the other floors. I'll go through them, but I won't hit each bullet point. The bullet points are relevant to each the same as before. But it's first floor, moving up to second floor, and of course the third floor, which is really 4 levels up from the ground. So you're up there quite a ways.
Yes, Alderman Lizzie Golia.
If a member of the Board of Ed could maybe, just to give a perspective on this current enrollment, and I'm looking at those traffic lanes for parents doing drop-off and thinking about the streets there and the one-way streets and coming from Main Street or however you're going to get there. Could someone on the Board of Ed maybe just identify the elementary schools that feed into Elm Street?
I think maybe the superintendent might have a better shot at that. Or Donna, either one.
Dr. Mosley, thank you.
I'm going to try to. Okay, I'm sorry. Main Dunstable, parts of Main Dunstable feed into Elm Street. We have, Dr. Chris feed into that area. Chris,
Sunset Heights?
Birch Hill,
Birch Hill, Sunset Heights.
some of Amherst Street.
Yep, some of Amherst Street, that's split between that and Pennachuck. It's one of the few schools that gets kind of different kids from different neighborhoods coming in. And believe it or not, once that happens, some of our kids in Elm Street end up going to different high schools as well.
Right.
Because it's in Dunstable, and that's what's off too. That's at the top of my head, that's what it is. There's always outliers as well with variances as well. Thank you, Ms. Oden, for helping me out on that one too.
Does Ledge go there?
Least some
no, of Ledge?
Some of Ledge, but mostly Ledge goes to Fairgrounds Middle. That much I do know.
Thank you.
All right, so then we get over to the site off of Cherrywood, and there's a few features of the site right now. Well, actually, this is the first time you've probably seen anything like this on the site. So you can see there we have a big blue building, proposed layout of a building, which we'll step into in a few moments. You can see a parking lot. You can see some fields. Something Elm doesn't have. It's nice to see some fields there, right? Some tennis courts and basketball courts. And currently, item F, I think it is, there's a proposed access, the main access, going down to Buck Meadow. Nothing's confirmed with that, but
I can address that. Sarah, Marcia, and I are working on that. There's other people that own the property between our property and Buck Meadow Road. Police and fire would prefer access from Buck Meadow Road for speed of service. And also, Cherrywood is not a really great road for traffic of that nature, and it really swings around. It's a long way to get there. So, from a fire and police standpoint, and for buses and everything, it would be better to come in from Buck Meadow. So we're working with the neighbors. They're being very cooperative, and we are surveying the land. We're going to give them the results of the survey, and we'll see if it's possible to have the entrance to Buck Meadow. And also, this is, I'm sure he mentioned it, but this is just, right now, it's just sort of a conceptual layout, not a final layout. Because one of the things, we have a big mound of dirt here that needs to be moved.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Some of the features that we'd look at on this site would be bringing in power from Buck Meadow, coming down Buck Meadow a little bit and then over. Then water, sewer, gas exists at Cherrywood. That would come up to the building from this access drive here. This access drive here would be intended to be an emergency access, not a primary access. And how that's addressed has yet to be finalized. So. Oh, and one more item up there. So there's some trails out here too. You can faintly see through here. There's existing trails. So that E indicates some access to existing trails that kind of go through the network of land up through here. Yes, sir.
Is there any wetlands? Where are the wetlands
Yes,
located?
thank you. This big green area is where the wetlands exist. There's right now we know of a single vernal pool indicated right in this area. So we are trying to keep our developments outside of that area currently.
The reason why I asked that question is because some of the things that other schools have done, they've had classrooms, science classrooms in the outside, and so I just wanted people to be aware that there's an opportunity for science class to be just walk out of their classroom and get some hands-on, looking at the wetlands.
Yes, agreed.
If it's decided to build a new school on the site, we'll have to do a much more extensive wetlands research in that area to find out what we can and can't do. That's why it's nothing there at the moment. Also, just for FYI, the city owns two pieces of other property over here. The one with the trails is for recreational use, and then there's one right behind the homes in Cherrywood that's a buffer. And that will stay. We're not going that far. In fact, we don't intend at the moment to even go into the other piece. But we'll see what the final design is. But we want to also make it so the neighborhood can take advantage of the fields that they pay for.
So real quickly on the site, if this becomes the main entry, you come in, we'd have a bus loop that comes in and drops off through here and allows the students to come in to the, I should say, this is the primary entrance to the building right here. So in this layout, this is what we propose. So parents would come in, they drop off along this queuing area here, and they drop off, and this would be the central focus area for access to the building right here. Buses can use a different loop, and they'd probably allow their students to go in through here. If we get to this point, doors would be timed so that it's only allowed in buses to go in and locked after that. Parking is out. You can see quite a bit of parking out here, but primary parking would be here, and handicaps would be up. Parking would be up close here, and allow direct access into the building. And additionally, there's a fire loop around the building here. It goes around the building right through there and comes out. And service yard, we'd be proposing back in this area here. So the service would come in and they could utilize this space and then head out that way. The kitchen, we'll get to that stuff too, but this is a proposed courtyard area for dining and as you'll see in a moment, the cafeteria and kitchen are right in that area. Okay. So here's the building. Some of the features in there are innovative middle school classroom communities, ability to close off public spaces for after-school activities and community access. I'll go through the building, kind of what those areas are in just a moment. Secure entrance, 21st century unified arts and STEM spaces. You'd have enhanced special ed spaces, ability to expand should the need be. So the building layout as it stands on the site, this is laid out exactly as you saw it in the site plan just a moment ago. And that parent drop-off occurred right here, and that primary entrance is right here. So there's a secure entry vestibule right here. Admin spaces are the purple areas, so that includes nurses and the admin and guidance counselors. Thank you. And then up in the greenish areas are like unified arts. That includes music and wood shop and art, STEM classes, wood shop. I said wood shop. The light blue areas are the gym areas, locker rooms, stage space here. And the orange area, so we got the kitchen area here and cafeteria here with that community stair concept here that would go up to a second floor, which we'll see in a moment. Back of house spaces, mechanical spaces, boiler rooms, janitorial maintenance staff, closets and work rooms are back in this area. And then you'd be able to close off this spot here. So there's the community spaces up here. It allows access to that building and doesn't allow people to, in the evening hours, go into the classroom wing, which is all these blue areas down here. So all the classrooms are down in these spaces. And they each have their own pod for wings. They're kind of pods and teaches little community spaces right here. You move up to the second floor. So here's that community stair I talked about in the cafeteria. You can see down below into that space. And then this orange area here is the library and computer area. And then coming down again, you'd have doors here that would prevent people from coming in and after hours, and you'd still have your classroom spaces down here. And you go up one more floor, and you have another pod of wings here. So, maybe the orientation decided to go 6th, 7th, 8th, or however orientation it decided. It works in numerous fashions. So there's your third floor. And then just to give a little peek at massing of what the building looks like massing-wise, it's not supposed to show you what materials are going to be on the building or anything like that. It's just to kind of give you a sense of what it might look like in proportions and fenestration. Even those aren't nailed in, but just as an idea, a concept, we decided to include this slide to show you. So that's kind of the massing of the building. So to identify where we are, this is that 3-story classroom wing you saw, which was on the bottom of the page on the previous. And then this is the library back here, and then the kitchen, cafeteria spaces are below here. Gymnasium, the unified art spaces, back of house mechanical spaces, and then the admin area, and then the main entry is this locale right here. Sir.
Superintendent?
Couple questions. Where's the auditorium?
No auditorium in the new school.
So what
So
we
where
do
will
is we have a stage in the gymnasium, so it's the equivalent of what we have at both Fairgrounds and at Pennachuck. So all three of them would have an equivalency in terms of a gymnasium with a stage.
So the gymnasium would serve as the auditorium, is that correct?
As a primary gathering space, and the stage allows the opportunity for performance from that location.
And how many individuals would be housed in the auditorium? What's the capacity of that?
Of the gymnasium, we have to,
Right now, it's planned to, oops, back wrong way. It's planned to have 800 bleacher spaces. You see those loaded each side, but there's also, chair spaces in the middle.
I know this is a proposal, but just what other schools have had this concept or structure?
most middle schools that we do don't necessarily include the auditorium in the middle school. We oftentimes will see it at the high school, and so a lot of the middle schools will have this concept where the stage is located in either in a cafeteria size location or off of a gymnasium, so you can hold those functions there. So most of them, including the other schools in your district, it's unusual, and we think the reason that Elm Street has one is because at one time that was the high school, and it certainly, as it's transitioned to a middle school, had the benefit of having the auditorium there, but very, very infrequent to have an auditorium in the middle school.
The cost of putting an auditorium in is prohibitive. Would add significant costs and space to the site.
I have another question. You talked about special education spaces. Can you just identify that for, just so that I'm clear about what that feels and looks like? And I'm particularly interested in space that has to do with medically fragile kids, kids that have difficulty in the classroom. I'm particularly referencing bathrooms as well. And we can kind of go back to the fine arts piece to that maybe later on.
So the intent with the special education, the medically fragile and some of the more intensive needs are actually located, the proposal is to locate them on a wing on the lowest level of the building itself. And so it could be any of the pods. The other resource rooms and some of the other special education, the intent that we've identified is to actually distribute them so that we're not putting them all in one location. So each wing has a dedicated resource and special education room in it as well. So in addition to the more intense needs, those are distributed throughout the.
So how many classrooms do you have identified, like for instance, for medically fragile kids? I'm particularly talking about not just having a bathroom, but also having a bathroom that has sufficient amount of space for those kids to get their services met. I'm also asking in respects to some of our kids in wheelchairs that need that level of flexibility and spacing. So I'm specifically making reference to classrooms that have a larger capacity, but not necessarily in terms of student ratio.
Absolutely, and so sometimes we'll call those the functional life skills classrooms, or there's intensive needs classrooms. And I have to go back to look at the identified how many, but what we did was we worked carefully with the special education coordinator to understand how many you currently have, and then to identify, make sure that we had opportunity for accommodating them as well as potentially some growth from students that are currently out of district service. So, and I don't have the numbers with me tonight, but I can look those numbers up for you.
And then just to get back to the fine arts piece, I do want to just acknowledge that we do have kids in our district that the fine arts, that's all they really have. And I understand that it's a high school, but understand that our kids who are not necessarily inclined for sports, and I saw there's plenty of fields, and I respect that. But understand that our kids, some of our kids shine not only on the football field, but also on stage.
Yeah.
And some of our kids from the Elm Street, and particularly I know Fairgrounds has a stage, but understand that stage is in the cafeteria. And we also utilize that gym. So understand that we couldn't also facilitate a sporting event and a fine arts event, and our kids particularly really shine in that. So that would just be my feeling on that. And I know that some fine arts people, I know they're not here tonight, but certainly that would come up. And I understand there's a cost piece to this, but I think we also want to keep in mind that we want to have an opportunity to mirror some of our programs that are currently in existence.
Excellent.
That was, yep, sorry, that was the end of the.
Okay, any questions? Excuse me. Any questions from board members? Yes.
Hi. So with respect to the auditorium, or not the auditorium, but the gym, so I would imagine you would bring chairs in? Would you bring in chairs? Is there a place for those to be stored nearby?
Yes. There's spaces back here, and there's also some storage spaces over here to store chairs.
Okay. And where the cafeteria is, where would deliveries happen? So would that be in an area that wouldn't crisscross where students are? Because
I'm
it looks
sorry.
like, where would deliveries to the cafeteria happen?
Where are we here? Cafeteria is right.
The yeah.
So it could either come in through here and bring it in, or you can come in through this door here or here. Actually, that's it right there. That's the
Okay.
door into the cafeteria directly.
So there's a dedicated space for deliveries to happen that's not near where students are?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? No? Okay. Thank you. We're going to have a period of public comment. You can make comments. If you have specific questions, there's a sheet up there to put the question on, and we will get back to you. But we don't have a question and answer period. You can after the meeting. After the meeting? Okay. So there'll be no construction manager's report because the construction manager is not here. And invoice approval, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so please note that we sent out a new financial sheet for you. You should have received that via email. And so there's actually two invoices, one to Damaris Environmental as a industrial hygienist for $2,085, and then the invoice for the traffic study, which was Vanessa and Associates, for $5,715. Those two total up to $7,800.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved that we pay the invoices as indicated by Mr. Smith.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the payment of invoices to Vanessa and Associates in the amount of $5,715 and Damaris Environmental for $2,085 for a grand total of $7,800. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Remarks by school administration, we missed that. Did you have anything else, Mr. Smith?
No, just as you noted, our next meeting is a special meeting on October 9th. I'll be right here. And that's when the presentation will be made by Harriman on the final report. And then we have programmed a special Board of Ed meeting just to give the same presentation to them. And then on the 24th will be the regular scheduled of this committee, but that's going to double as a public comment
Right.
session.
Right, we will have a setup in one of the schools somewhere, yet to be determined, where we'll have all of this and more presentations from the final report and solicit input from any members of the public that want to come and make comments. All right, so we now have comments by members of the public. If you have a comment that you'd like to make, you can come up and sit at that microphone next to the superintendent. If you have a question, please write the questions there, and we'll get back to you with the answers. Does anyone have any comments? All right.
I do.
I haven't got to that part yet, Mr. Mosher. Now, comments from committee members. Mr. Mosher.
Thank you. You know, thinking about that Buck Meadow Road, I've been in this neighborhood for better than 40 years, and I can't think of a better place to site a school than on Buck Meadow. Knowing Buck Meadow for a long time and some of my past endeavors, I find that all that farmland that's out there has a lot of promise into what we can put on there. But I think that the location there on off of Buck Meadow is a very good location, and I've been by it many times, and I know that the services are there by. We have a former mayor who has a business right there, practically on the corner, and we have other services that are there. And it's a great, just overall, it's a great location. And but it would have been a great place to build a house and have a bit of a yard and farm and whatever might float your boat. This is a very good location. And I'm sure that our contractors there will have a bang-up job getting it done. And it will be a prize that we can point to in the future and say, look at what we have accomplished.
Thank you, Mr.
Great
Mosier.
time.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. And Director Marchand and I have been working with the neighbors that own the land between Buck Meadow and the school site. They've been very cooperative to date, and if we build on the site and we decide to have a road to Buck Meadow, I'm sure we'll be working very closely with the neighbors to ensure that we're as least disruptive as possible. Any other comment members from board members? Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, on that same point, I noticed, I know that this is just a conceptual plan, but on that same thing, I noticed the ball field, one of the ball fields was pretty close to the neighborhood, the houses along Cherrywood, and I couldn't tell how close they are, but I would just encourage us to make sure that there's plenty of buffer there, that the neighbors wouldn't be disturbed by any activity at the ball field.
If you go down and look at the site, you'll see it's really heavily wooded. And it's our intent to leave a significant buffer zone between the school site and the neighbors on especially Medallion. And on Cherrywood, there are two other pieces of land the city owns between our site and the homes on Cherrywood for the most part. And they're all heavily wooded. So it doesn't, so I think the noise abatement from that is going to be significant. So we're trying to be as user-friendly with the neighborhood as possible if we locate the school there.
Thank you.
Alderman Mozzigolia.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to thank the folks from Harriman for their presentation. And although I know much of the interest is around Elm Street and the new school, I would guess, knowing some of the parents who currently go or have in the past had children attend Pennachuck Fairgrounds, taking this opportunity to not only remove portables but address the biggest headache, I think, around any school, traffic, is huge. And so I think externally looking at how we improve the flow of traffic, be it vehicles or pedestrians, is something that everyone will welcome. And then I also think as we talk about looking at our unified arts programs and our STEM programs and how they then tie into our career and technology programs, providing those upgrades as we move through this process. Again, across the two schools we know we're going to be upgrading, as well as looking at what that looks like in the new building and making sure there's equity. So when everyone gets to whichever of their respective high schools, they will have had the same opportunities. So thank you for that information.
Anyone else? Okay, just for the public, on October 9th, right here, we will be presenting the final report from Harriman on the 4 sites that you saw tonight and recommendations. And then on October 24th, will be another joint special meeting following that. Somewhere in between there, probably, we'll be meeting with the Board of Ed, but, and there will be several meetings after that before any final decision is made. And when a final decision is made on the path forward and we have a price associated with it, and there's a request for bonding, there will be a public hearing where people also get to comment on the school. But a lot of steps yet to go. All right, do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. The motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:12.